Hi, I'm Annalise Pask, one of the directors at Philanthropy Company, and thank you very much for joining us for 5 questions with Gaby Sumner. Really delighted to be talking to Gaby today. Thank you for joining us, Gaby. Gaby is Interim Chief Exec of the Villiers Park Educational Trust and has formerly led campaigns and fundraising teams at organisations including Cambridge Children's Hospital, English National Ballet, Tate and the Royal Court, just to name a few. And we're delighted to have you with us, Gaby. So thank you. We will jump straight in with our first question, which is, which person or organisation dedicated to philanthropy do you admire and why? Can be past or present.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to take part. So the first is the Rees family and Rees Foundation, who are based up in the Northeast. And they have a really incredible mission to support education in Tyneside in the Northeast, and in particular to support more young people into engineering. And they've had a foundation for 15 years. They've made such a huge impact in the community. They have done a huge amount to support one of our programmes at Villiers Park, and they've given multi-year support, so they've really enabled us to sustain that for our organisation, and that is a sort of mantra that they've taken through their supports locally. So they stand out as a really important sort of and very committed philanthropist for the community. And my second is perhaps an obvious and well-known one, which is the Weston family and Garfield Weston Foundation. I just kind of kept on coming back to them. They are such trailblazers in philanthropy, not only for the amount that they give and their size, but actually for the way that they go about that. I think that they really understand what charities need. They're willing to invest in your core costs and your core infrastructure, and I think the way that they do that is so impressive. So they were very quick off the mark with emergency COVID funding, and I think they really kind of helped the sector to move forward, and they certainly really kind of set a kind of they certainly helped my organisation enormously at the time. So I think they are a really important and very inspiring funder. What I also love about them is their collaborative spirit, and that they've worked in partnership with all kinds of different organisations. I can see at the moment they're working with the Art Fund on the Western Loan Scheme, and that idea of kind of pooling resources and coming together with other philanthropists to achieve more, I think that's so important.
Agreed. I mean, yes, great leadership there, and would completely agree with you on both those choices. Fantastic, thank you. So what change would you like to see, or what are you looking forward to seeing in the charity sector in 2023, which is not far away?
No. So I think probably answer this in 2 ways. One is that in the higher education sector, where Villiers Park is working and sort of supporting young people into education pathways, we're really looking forward to more collaboration. The Office for Students has just recently done a consultation on their sort of future direction, and what's really encouraging is a much greater emphasis on collaboration, and the kind of upfront acknowledgement that collaboration can deliver and achieve more for young people, which is fantastic. There's a cost to be met, obviously, but actually it's really great to see that the recognition for collaboration is there. So we're looking forward to that. I think in general, we're going to be in a really challenging economic landscape, and we know that people and communities are going to be struggling. And I think, as we saw during the pandemic, one of the things I admire about so many of my colleagues and charities in the sector is how they adapt in the face of crises and are able to be agile and resilient, and work in different ways to meet the needs of the communities that they're working with. And so actually I wouldn't say I'm looking forward to that, but actually it is something that I think the sector is amazing at, and I'm sure that there'll be some really innovative and original and collaborative ideas that come out of the year ahead.
Absolutely, yeah, great, thank you. So question number 3, Gaby, you've worked on some huge campaigns across the arts, healthcare, social mobility sectors. Can you tell us how you've had to maybe adapt your approach in fundraising for these different causes and perhaps different donor types or not? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I started off by thinking about this, about some of the consistent ingredients that kind of across the campaigns I've worked on, and I've written myself a little list, so I'll try not to look down, but there are a kind of number of things that I think combine to create a successful campaign across the organisations I've worked in, and lots of other people that I've worked with as well. And then a few differences that obviously make the kind of nuance and make sure those campaigns are successful in the organisations that they're in. So when I was thinking about kind of what makes a sort of successful campaign, I think, you know, that compelling reason and that kind of urgent case for support and the story that we're telling, I think that's kind of has to be absolutely at the heart of that campaign. And then fundraisers are brilliant communicators. You know, we know how to tell that story, but I think it comes to life when you're being told that story by, you know, your beneficiaries or your volunteers, or, you know, the people that you will be supporting in the future. So it's who is telling that story and having that really authentic voice. And I think it's a combination of those two things that's so important. I think also it's about having ambition married with pragmatism. So, you know, I know when I think about where I want to, you know, give, if I want to support a campaign, I want the campaign to be doing something more and is aspirational, but I also want it to achieve what it wants to achieve. And I think, you know, that balance is really important. I think there are 3 other things I think combine to create a successful campaigns. One is about data. So that's, you know, whether that's about your impact or your outcomes or your data on your fundraising. A passionate and dedicated team. So campaigns are rarely linear. They've often got ups and downs and, you know, moments of huge amounts of energy and activity, and other times where they're quieter. And actually having a team of people who are, you know, really committed and focused and work brilliantly together is so important. And then finally, you know, great stewardship.
Sure.
And I saw a really interesting post from Louise Morris, a major gifts fundraiser this week, talking about thanking donors. And she talked about thanking donors for caring. And I thought that was really interesting, because actually it is sort of making that much more emotional connection, you know, to their support. So yeah, they're my consistent ingredients.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
And then obviously there are differences, because you then need to adapt that to the organisation that you're in. And I think so much of that comes down to sort of planning where you think the funding might come from, and sort of the process and the timescale that takes, and then your sort of resources. So actually, you know, are there resources available now, or do you need certain things to happen in a certain way in order, you know, to gain more resource during the course of the campaign? So those two are so interdependent, and I think that really defines the kind of structure of the campaign. And kind of woven into that then is about staff and volunteers, and, you know, who is actually going to be leading the campaign, who's, you know, what's your leadership, and who's going to be driving it from, you know, from the team that's working with the leadership as well. And I've thought about some of the differences in the campaigns, you know, I've worked on. And at English National Ballet, we integrated our capital campaign into our revenue fundraising, because we had a really strong established fundraising team, and we already had a development board set up, and actually we had those structures in place that meant we could enhance those. We didn't necessarily need to create something new. Whereas actually at Cambridge Children's Hospital, which has got a reach across the whole of the east of England, we needed a whole new volunteer structure to really make that campaign reach that region. And so that was set up specifically for that campaign. So I think so much of it depends on reach, but that planning point and kind of use of resources is really important.
Yes, and I think that's sort of the life beyond the building, and in the context of a capital campaign,
Yeah,
the impact on people beyond the bricks and the mortar.
absolutely.
And I love what you said there about thank you for caring, and moving away from just a transaction and just about the size of the gift, really tapping into that emotional side of giving. So it's a great point, and I think a lot of what you said you might help answer the next question as well, which is that we have seen a lot of organisations firing up their capital campaign plans or reconsidering their capital campaign plans after putting things on pause, understandably, during the pandemic. And do you think now is the right time to be embarking on capital campaigns? And what sort of key considerations should charities work through before putting the spade in the ground and launching?
I think you just said it, Annalise, about the fact that the building is more than the building. It's about, what happens in it and what the kind of future work is. So I think one of the reasons that organisations, might be looking at capital campaigns at the moment is because we're thinking about how we can create more sustainability for our organisations and what the right business model is for our organisation, and then how we can achieve more. And so I think it's one of those, I think some of this probably comes out of the pandemic and the changes that we've all had to make to the way that we work during that time. And actually for Villiers Park, we had a building, and we really thought about, actually, is the building the sort of the right thing for us? Do we need that building? We're working in a more agile and digital world, and actually, can we do what we do in a different way? And we made the decision to sell our building to an organisation that shares our social values. So there's a legacy for us in terms of what that building will go on to do with another organisation. But for us, it gives us a really strong platform for future growth. And we've decided to do that. So that's been a decision that's taken, years to come to, but actually is about thinking about, I think, how we want to build and reach our beneficiaries and make the greatest impact. But that all said, if an organisation is thinking about a capital campaign, it's not that now as much as any could be a good time. I think that whether something or not is the right time does need a lot of planning, and I think taking time over a feasibility study is really important. I mean, you kind of look at everything else that's going on in the world, and an awareness of the socioeconomic climate that we're in is important, but actually it doesn't tell you everything, and you can't do anything about it. You could be waiting for years until it seems like the right time, and actually you might not need to, because you might have a community of supporters or funders who are really willing and wanting to get behind your organisation in that way, which I think it comes back to that kind of feasibility and planning, right at the start. I did have a couple of other thoughts. One I think is so important about leadership, whether the leadership, you've got that in place to really drive it forward. And then there's, when you're doing the feasibility, actually, what's the impact of the campaign on everything else that you do? So, is that campaign needed to take the programme forward? Actually, is your revenue fundraising in a place where you can divert some resources to focus more on a capital campaign? So there's a few other nuances that I think can kind of influence whether now is the right time. And of course, with great stewardship and a kind of really embedded campaign, often capital campaigns can lead to increased revenue fundraising in the long term, and lead to cultural change within an organisation. And so that's also can be a really positive benefit long term. And I just thought about the step change that organisations like the National Theatre with the NT Future campaign, or English National Ballet, our fundraising almost doubled during our capital campaign. So actually it's about more than just that building. It's about all sorts of other factors, including kind of the shift in the organisation's culture. So I think it's a really complicated, quite complex decision to make to go ahead with a capital campaign. But I think that's true of any capital campaign at any time, and maybe not just now.
Yeah, no, some really important considerations there. And that leads us to our final question today, which is apart from maybe your current role, or maybe including your current role, where do you personally feel that you've made the greatest difference, and what are you most proud of?
That's such a great question, and I really enjoyed thinking about it. I have picked something that isn't actually from my fundraising kind of background. It's more connected to my role now, but when I was in my 20s, I volunteered as a mentor for a charity called Friendship Works, which is now part of Family Action. And I hope I had a real impact through it. It certainly had a huge impact on me. And I used to go and meet a young person every Saturday, and we would go and go and do different experiences together. So I gave a few hours of my time, and the aim was that you sort of had fun, shared experiences, and became a sort of trusted mentor really to that young person. It was so inspiring. It opened my eyes, enormously. And that was 10, 15 years ago, and it still has a profound impact on me. I still think about it. And I think I really look at that as being the point at which it really inspired my interest and commitment to social mobility. And that's with other jobs in between and working on other really amazing campaigns. Actually, I feel like that has kind of led me to the job that I'm in today. So that's probably the thing that I think about most in terms of making the greatest impact. Certainly, I hope on them. It certainly did on me.
I'm sure you did, and I think that's a great example. And I think you and I need no convincing of the rewards of working in our sector, and the experiences that we have, and the privilege that we have to meet the people that we do, and how that can continue to inform and drive our work. So that's a really nice note to finish on. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights, and really nice to talk to you today. And thank you again for giving your time.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Annalise.
Thanks, Gaby.